Hey, I'm Greg Honeycutt, and I'm the... Stop.
No, we're not stopping.
I was just saying, we don't
Okay.
stop on this.
Okay.
It's all good.
Jackie, like when I went to say my name, Jackie goes, and I was like, is he talking?
No,
I was like, what?
I'm getting stoked here. It's like,
Okay, we're
hold
good.
on. This is blooper reel, go. Okay? Blooper reel, go.
Alright, we're ready. Hey, I'm Greg Honeycutt, and I'm the FCS agent in Harnett County.
And I'm Jackie Helton. I'm the 4-H agent here in Harnett County. And now we've just been to the farm, and now it's time to do a little cooking in the kitchen. So, Greg, can you tell me what recipes are we going to be doing today?
Yeah, Jackie, so today what we're going to do is we're going to be making a sweet potato biscuit. And to go with that sweet potato biscuit, we're going to make a blueberry compote to go inside, make it extra juicy and extra tasty. So I think we actually saw on the farm that they were producing blueberries there, so we're going to use some of those blueberries and some of those things that you would find on the farm. And then we had to make a North Carolina staple with our sweet potato, so we're going to put that in there as well.
You know what's great about these recipes? I've actually had people on our Facebook account asking us to make this particular recipes right here together. So that's perfect timing.
Yep, this is one of those recipes that I think a lot of people always see and they want to try it out, but they think it's too complicated or too tough, but we're going to show you how easy it really is.
Sounds great. So now we got 2 recipes. Can you sort of walk us through those recipes and make sure we got everything that we need?
Yeah, so first things first, whenever you're getting ready to do a new recipe or you're trying to cook something, you always want to make sure that you check and make sure you have all the ingredients, because if you get started and you're halfway through and you realize you don't have something, you're going to be in trouble. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about, I'll talk out what we're going to have for this first recipe, our sweet potato biscuit, and we'll just check and make sure we have it. All right, so I've got 3/4 cup of mashed sweet potato, and so I've got some sweet potato here, so we know we're good there. I've got a 1/3 cup to a 1/2 cup of whole milk. We got that over there?
Yep,
All
sure
right,
do.
so we got our milk. Also, I've got 1.5 cup of all-purpose flour for dusting. So in this recipe, it calls for all-purpose flour. And you'll notice when it says all-purpose flour, it's going to also come with baking powder and sugar. And the reason a lot of recipes have all-purpose flour is because that's what you're probably going to have. But we have actually did something a little bit different. And what kind of flour do we have today, Mr. Jackie?
We have self-rising flour. So it's already got the baking powder and the salt added to it, so it's ready to go.
Awesome. So we'll already have all that all in one. So if you have self-rising flour or you'd like to buy that one, that'll work too. But if you have all-purpose, you can definitely make these adjustments so you'll get that nice rise. And then the last thing is we got 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and we want this cold.
Gotcha. I just pulled it out of the refrigerator before we got started.
Perfect. All right, and we'll talk a little bit too when we get our recipe started why cold butter versus room temperature butter and some of those things might make a difference. All right, so that'll be everything that we'll need for our sweet potato biscuits. But we're also going to make a blueberry compote. So I'm going to read out these and make sure we have these ingredients too.
Hold on. What's a blueberry compote?
So a blueberry compote. So what this actually is, you probably used jam or a jelly before. A compote is kind of like a quicker, smoother, easier sauce kind of thing that you can make. Whereas if you're going to make a jelly or a jam, a lot of times those things take time to set up, or you might have to go through the process of canning or something like that. And so this is something that you can make pretty easy with some fresh ingredients, or even you can actually use frozen blueberries for this too. So we're going to need 2 cups of blueberries. You can have these either fresh or frozen. We've got fresh today, fresh from the farm. And then we're going to need a couple tablespoons of water. So we've got a water source, so that we're good there. We're going to need 1/4 cup of sugar, which I see here. And then the last thing is this is an optional thing. Sometimes when you're doing these recipes, it's good to add a little bit of an acid. Helps break these things down a little bit, gives it a little bit different flavor. And so the recipe calls for lemon juice, but we have a little bit of lime today. Lime juice, it'll work just fine. We're not going to put too much in there. And this is optional if you want to have this or not. So that's all the ingredients that we'll need today.
Awesome. What kind of materials are we going to need to cook on and such? You know, if those that are home cooking with us today, what kinds of materials such as pots, pans, things like that we might need too for each recipe?
Yeah, so everything that you see here today is what we've got. Everything that you'll need is pretty much out here, minus one thing, and that being the oven. So if you're going to cook these sweet potato biscuits, you're going to have some form of oven. You might have a smaller oven or some kind of thing that you bake in at home, or you have your traditional oven that would be built into to your home. And so some of the things that we've got up here that you might see that you might some you've seen a lot before, and some might be a little bit newer tools to you. So we've got our pan here, or a sauce pot. We've also got a heating source. So we've got the heating source here because it makes it a little bit easier for you all to see. But you can always use your stovetop as well, because this is basically just a burner for your stovetop. So it basically emulates that for us here. I've got a couple of spoons here. Several different measuring cups, and then you'll notice we've got multiple bowls, and you'll see how those bowls will come into play when we start to make the biscuit in a little bit. Mr. Jackie, what's this tool that we have here?
This right here is what I use to sift flour. Some people, they actually it's got a hand crank on it, a little bit more expensive, but a lot of folks may have this already in their house, and so I just use it, and I'll show you exactly how I work my flour through that, because I like a sifted flour. It makes for a lighter biscuit, and I want my biscuits to be very light.
Awesome. Great. And so that's one that you might have seen before and not know how to use. Another one that we have, we're lucky enough to have a potato masher. So this recipe calls for mashed sweet potatoes, and so this will make it a little bit easier for us to mash those up. But if you didn't have that, you could easily use a fork. And now I see Mr. Jackie's got a tool this one looks kind of interesting. I'm not sure about this one. What's this one for?
Yeah, I actually don't have one of these at home. Sometimes I'll use a fork, or I'll just use my fingers. But this is designed to actually help cut through the butter. So we talked about having 6 tablespoons of butter. It's going to be going into our recipe. This is to help break it up into the flour so that it's evenly spread throughout the entire biscuit mixture.
Awesome. Yeah, and like Mr. Jack said, you could use a fork or you could use 2 butter knives, whatever works for you if you didn't happen to have this particular tool.
And you always have those hands.
You always have those fingers. All right. And then we see over here we've got a couple more measuring cups. And then we've also I see something that's on that table. Is that a cup? Is that a glass? What is that?
This is actually a hard plastic cup. When I was growing up, we didn't have a biscuit cutter, and this calls for a biscuit cutter. So what Mom would do was she'd actually pull out a cup right out of the cabinet based off the size of biscuit she was wanting. So if she was cooking sausage, she'd try to find one just a little bit the size of the sausage, and she uses that to cut. So just in case I don't have biscuit cutters at home, I want to show them you can just take a simple cup like this to actually use as a biscuit cutter today.
Awesome, that's great. And so so sometimes we might not have all the tools and we have to improvise. And then you'll see we have a whisk over there to help whisk up some of the ingredients. And then Mr. Jackie's got him a large plate or a large pallet thing that he's going to actually use to do his biscuits on. So if you have one of those big biscuit boards, you could use that, or if you have a small cutting board, you might be able to use that. You just might have to adjust a little bit here and there. And then there's some that even have, you can do it on if you have a food grade countertop. So today we're cooking on cloth, or we're preparing on cloth, and so we don't want to actually knead our dough or put our dough out on this. But if you have a food grade countertop or something like that, you're welcome to use that as well. All right, so I think that covers everything, and then we've got our pan down there, and our pan's going to be what we're going to put our biscuits on to put them in the oven.
And to make our cleanup a little bit easier, I've already lined it with parchment paper as well. That's another optional thing. You could use some of the butter wrapper if you want to as a non-stick, but I went ahead and put parchment paper just to make cleanup a little bit easier.
That sounds great. I love easy cleanup. All right, so now we've got these 2 recipes. So what do you think next?
Well, I guess we got to figure out what order we're going to cook these in. Like when we're cooking a meal at the house, I like everything to get done at the same time. Sometimes, when you're doing multiple recipes, you got to figure out which one to start with. So,
yeah. Can
you help us figure that out?
Yeah, so one thing to look at, a lot of times your recipes, and this particular one gives you a total time, an idea of how long it's going to take. And you can always work backwards and think of your cook time, and then work your way back and think of how long it might take you to get these other things, and that'll give you your total time. So it might be a little bit different for you. But these biscuits are going to go in for about 12 to 14 minutes is how long they're going to take to cook. And it's probably going to take us, somewhat close to that long to get everything ready and get it prepared. So we're looking at around 30 minutes or so for the total process from in to out. And then when these biscuits come out, they're going to need to rest just for a little bit because they're going to be too hot to eat straight away. And then we've got the other one with our blueberry compote. This is one that's pretty simple. We're just going to put everything in our saucepan here, and then it's going to take about 20 minutes to cook, maybe not even quite that long, maybe 15. We'll see how long it takes. And it kind of depends on how broke down you want the blueberries. So with thinking about these things, and we want this compote to go on nice and warm, which we can keep it warm with our hot pad here. But I think it'd probably be best because it seems to be more steps, and we need to get it in the oven, and we need to have some time in the oven for those biscuits. That we start with our biscuits. So what do you think about that?
I think that's perfect.
All right, so you'll notice that the recipe says that we're gonna use mashed sweet potatoes. And if you go to the store and you buy a sweet potato, you can't just mash it up straight like this. Maybe you can. Maybe if you've been working out a lot and you're real strong, maybe you can figure out a way to do that. But most of the time we'll want to cook it a little bit. And so you can cook them in the oven. How long do you think it'll take in the oven, Mr. Jackie, to cook one of these?
Oh, at least 30 to 45 minutes, and that's at a high temperature.
Yeah, and that's saying that you would have a potato about this size. I know that we've been to some fields in Harnett County before, and they have massive sweet potatoes.
They call them jumbos.
Jumbos, and those jumbos might take you an hour to an hour and a half to cook. We don't have a lot of time today, so one trick that we've used in the past, and I'm going to show you today, is we're going to cook this in the microwave. All right, so you can actually cook potatoes and many different vegetables in the microwave pretty easily, but we're going to cook this one in the microwave. But before I get started doing that, what I want to do is we're going to read the recipe and make sure that we're set up and starting off right, because there's one tip that anytime we're using the oven that we always want to make sure we do, and that's what in this first part of our directions it says to preheat our oven. All right.
So what is preheating the oven?
Yeah, so preheating the oven is the process. So if you go over to your oven on a general day or a general time, it's going to be cool. The oven's going to be cool. And so to cook it, we've got to turn it on. And that process takes a while to get up to the temperature that we need. So these particular biscuits are going to cook at 425. So if our oven's roughly room temperature, it's going to take a while for it to reach up to that temperature. Oven is roughly going to be around room temperature. So what we're going to do is we're going to get it preheated, and I'm going to set that preheat so we can get it up to that 425 so that it'll be ready when we get our biscuits ready. So there's nothing worse than having your baked good ready to go in and then you forgot to preheat your oven. You got to let it sit and wait. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that now while we're here.
All right. As you're setting the preheat the oven, is there anything you should do before you actually cut it on?
Yeah, Mr. Jackie, so one thing I would want to do, and I've actually did it before we started today, but you always want to check your oven because you never know what might be hiding in there. So some people actually use their oven for storage. So grandma's pocketbook might be in the oven, and we don't want to burn up anything inside the oven. So we always want to check it before we do that. So we made sure we checked it today.
Yeah, I know somebody wants to put some plastic bowls in there just to hide them maybe because they haven't washed them yet. Somebody cut on the oven and well, they might have just melted in there.
Oh, yeah, no plastic in an oven would be quite a big mess.
Smells amazing. Not.
All right, so now that I got that preheated, anytime that you're doing one of these recipes, it's a good idea to always read through your entire recipe before you get started. And since we've already read through it, I know kind of where we're going to be going, so I won't read through it directly. But I've got my oven preheated, so now I want to get that sweet potato ready. So let's say that you didn't have your sweet potato ready beforehand. Here's the process of how we're going to get it going. So this particular sweet potato has not been washed yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go through the process of washing that off and getting that ready. And Mr. Jackie, while I wash this off, can you tell them why I need to wash this off maybe?
Absolutely. Do y'all know where sweet potatoes grow? Do they grow on a tree, on a vine, above ground, or underground? Well, sweet potato actually grows underground. They actually have an equipment to actually turn the potatoes over when they're ready to harvest so that the pickers can come along and pick them right off the ground. But they're going to be under the ground in the dirt. So you definitely want to make sure you wash them, for sure. And of course, there's all kinds of different sizes of sweet potatoes that you can get. We talked about the jumbos, which are the really big ones. In the store, depending on how you're going to make them, you can get them all different sizes. I actually prefer the smaller ones. They bake up a little quicker in the oven, so I don't have to heat up my house so much, especially during summertime.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yep. So I went ahead and washed this off. And when you're washing off vegetables, you just want to wash them off with just general running water. Doesn't need to be too hot, too cold. But there's no need to add any extra chemicals or soap or anything like that. Also, too, one thing that we didn't mention that we always do before we get ready to start cooking is that me and Jackie, before we got started, we washed up our hands. So we went ahead and went through the process of washing our hands. In this process, we're going to use soap and water, and you'll see us doing this throughout today as we go through different parts. So as our hands get dirty, we're gonna re-wash them over again. We've got our hands already washed, so I'm going to go through this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a couple holes in here. And so you can do this with a knife or a fork's normally plenty good to do this. And I'm just going to try to push the fork down in, maybe a inch or so. And so I'm going to go across in a couple different spots.
So why are you poking holes in that perfectly good sweet potato, Greg?
Yeah, so when the microwave cooks it, this actually helps it to penetrate down and to actually cook in and out, and also lets it vent a little bit, because if we didn't do this, we could potentially have an explosion in there, and we don't want that.
Actually, I can tell you, even a regular potato, if you're cooking it in the microwave, needs a few of those holes. Something that's worked good for me, if you don't have a fork, do you know those corn cob holders where it's got there? They really reach in there, and sometimes they're easier to get in and out. So we use those at the house a lot.
Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this one and get it ready to go into my microwave. And the way that we're going to do it is we would do for a sweet potato this size, and it will be somewhat size dependent. I'm going to microwave it on one side for about 4 to 5 minutes. And after that, then we'll actually flip the potato over and then cook it again for maybe a couple more minutes. And it might vary by your microwave or the size of your potato, but that's the general way to do it. And what we've actually done, I'm gonna put these in, put this one in now. But we've actually had a couple that we already done and we've already let cool down, because this recipe, you want your sweet potato cool. So if you can do this ahead of time, keep it in the fridge, it'll be ready to go whenever you get ready to make your biscuits. So I'm going to get ready and put this one in, and I'll grab our other ones that we had.
Mr. Greg, I noticed you're actually putting that into the microwave and it's got its skin on it. Do we need to have these peeled? Should we peel it before it goes into the microwave?
Funny you should ask, Jackie. So we don't want to do any more steps than we have to. And what's great about sweet potatoes is they normally are very easy to peel after they've been cooked. So as you can see here, I've got some that we cooked and we had give them a little bit of time to cool ahead of time, and you can see how easy the skin just peels right off.
Oh yeah, I mean that will be easy to mash with a fork for sure.
Exactly. All right, so looks like our next step is that I'm going to go ahead and get these mashed up. So I'm going to do this for you, and then we're going to get ready and make our other make our other dry ingredients things to go in here. So for these sweet potatoes, when I get ready to mash them, I'm just going to go ahead and put a good amount into the bowl, because I want to make sure I have enough. If I had one large sweet potato, that'd probably be about the right amount of sweet potato. But I'm going to put them in here, and then I'll pull them out and measure out after that, so I make sure I have enough.
Makes sense. So you'd be using like a dry measure cup to measure these like you would if you're doing flour or something like that?
Exactly, yep. All right.
Yeah, it's just peeling so perfectly. So one less step to have to do. You don't have to worry about having a peeler.
Yep. Because if you've ever peeled a lot of potatoes, it's a job for sure.
It is. And sometimes too, if you got a knife instead of a regular peeler, you can actually lose a lot of the actual vegetable when you're peeling.
Exactly. All right, so I'm going to put this last little bit in there. I'm pretty sure I've got plenty enough now, and then I'm going to go ahead and mash these up. All right, so with mashing these sweet potatoes up, like I said, we're lucky we have a potato masher here, and you'll just want to work around and just get this mashed around just like this. All right, so I'm just going to mash it, and I'm just trying to get it down to a nice, simple little paste. If you don't have the masher, you can always take your fork, and you're just going to push around the sides and mash it up. And you should know when your potato's ready, when it comes out. You should be able to slide the fork right into the potato very easily. If not, and it's still a lot of resistance, then what you'll want to do is just put it back in there for a little bit longer.
If you had a really big one of those jumbo sweet potatoes, Greg, could you cut that potato in half or maybe in quarters to help it microwave a little better?
Exactly. So especially when you start to think about how much you would need. So if you don't want to waste the whole sweet potato, or you want to save one for something else, you can always cut it in half or cut it in quarters to cut down on that time, and also to get a little bit closer to the measurement that you would need.
And if I have 6 people in my family, where you have 2 in your immediate family. Would this be something that I could double the recipe if I needed to for my family to make sure I have enough for everybody?
Exactly. Yep. So you can always double this recipe to give you more biscuits. So if you're going to cook for a crowd or have a larger family, you could always double the recipe.
Yeah, I'm sure when people smell these in the office, we may have to do a double recipe.
Yeah, we might have to double up. We don't know yet. All right, so I've got these ready, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually get ready to measure these out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these and put them back on my tray, and then I'm going to get ready to measure them out. Because I think my recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup. And so I'm going to grab my 3/4 measuring cup, and I'm also going to put these back over here. So while I'm doing that, Jackie, do you want to take the recipe and maybe look and see and make sure you got your next ingredients for the next steps ready?
Yeah, let's see. What's next thing here? In a large bowl, we're going to whisk together the flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt. Since we're using self-rising flour, we're not going to need the baking powder and salt. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start off with the flour. And like I said, since I've got my little sifter here, I'm going to show you how to measure the flour. Because when you're doing baking, measurements are very important. We need to use exact measurements, or we're not going to get the quality product that we want. So it calls for 1.5 cups of flour. So I've got two measurement cups here, 1 cup and 1.5 cup. If I didn't have the cup, I could just use one and not dirty it up and use it 3 times. But for speed today, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And I'm going to pull my flour here. I've already got my flour out into a bowl. And one of the things I like to do is take and have a spoon. Some people will actually just go in here and just dump their thing in here. I'm just going to show you like this. And what happens is you get a lot of compaction that way. So I don't like to fill it up because that puts more flour than I actually need. We actually did an experiment making biscuits one time, and we almost had an extra 1/2 cup of flour from the compaction, which would have made those biscuits very dry. Because just trying to do that. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we're going in here light. So I'm going to use a spoon, and I'm going to just slowly put in spoon after spoon in here, so I'm not getting that compaction from just dumping it into the container. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to overfill my container. See, I'm going above there. All right. Then I'm going to take a butter knife, and I'm going to use the back side of it, and I'm just going to go back and forth until I get this perfectly level. That's the great thing about a dry measure cup. This right here is making sure I've got exactly 1 cup. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to dump that into my sifter. And I think I got enough room, so I'm going to go ahead and do my 1/2 cup as well. I'm going to do the exact same procedure that I just did. I'm going to slowly put it in there and fill it up over the amount. Make sure I got plenty there. And I'm just going to use my butter knife to go over it with the back side of it. And there's 1.5 cups. And this sifting right here, if you look, it's almost like snowfall. That right there is going to make for a much lighter biscuit. And if you've ever had a biscuit that's really hard, and it's not because somebody overbaked it, it's probably because they used too much flour because it wasn't sifted, or they didn't measure out the flour just right. I'm going to use my hand just to get those last little clumps there. And in my bowl now, I got light flour just like I needed. Now it said I needed something else. What was the next thing I needed to add to it? I think it was sugar.
Yep, need a little bit of sugar.
All right, so let's see. How much sugar does it call for?
I think it's 2 tablespoons.
2 tablespoons of sugar. Okay, so we got this amazing little bowl right here, and let's see what measurement I've got here. It's always good to double check what your measurements are. So it called for 2 tablespoons, correct? Mm-hmm. All right, I have a tablespoon measurement. Because we found out one time, sometimes when you're measuring out salt and different things, if you don't know the difference between a tablespoon and a teaspoon, or a 1/4 teaspoon, you get a totally different product. Is that correct?
Exactly, yep. So always make sure you check those measurements. So if you look on your recipes and see the measurements, sometimes they won't even say tablespoon or won't say teaspoon. They'll just indicate that with a big T, like a capitalized T, or a little t. And so tablespoon would be the big T because it's bigger, and teaspoon, little t, because it's smaller. So while he's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and get ready. And Mr. Jackie, will you pass me the milk? Because I'm going to get you a little bit of milk in this sweet potato so it's ready to go. So you'll also see sometimes when you look at recipes, it will have your ingredients and it'll say, let's say, a cup of milk, but it's actually made for 2 parts. So you might only put 1/2 in at one time and the other half in at the other. And you'll see this a lot in baking. And especially with this recipe, you'll see that we'll have an extra little bit of milk that we may or may not use depending on how what kind of texture we get. I'm gonna go ahead and measure this out, because this first part, I think we're gonna add 1/3 cup of milk. And so when I'm getting ready to put this milk in and I'm trying to determine how I'm going to get my measurement correct, since I won't need this anymore, I'm going to go ahead and move it out of my way so I have a clean workstation.
Now, are you going to be using a wet or dry measure spoon cup this time?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to use a wet one, and the reason why that I'm using this is because it's designed to measure liquids. All right, so with this particular cup, you'll see it has like a little spout on the side to make it easier for pouring, and also it's clear. So if it's clear, as you can see in a minute when I get ready to check, I'll be able to actually look through and determine if I've got the right amount. And like you said before, with baking, it's very important to get your measurements correct, because it's more of a science. And so if you get these measurements off too far, your product won't turn out quite like you like it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, and anytime that I am measuring liquids, you always want to make sure you get down to eye level. So if I'm holding it here, I can't keep it level. So I need to find a level surface, and this might be on your countertop or whatever flat surface you have. And I'm just going to go ahead and reach down, and I'm going to check that I can get to 1/3 of a cup. All right, so that's about right. And so anytime you're measuring liquids, you'll notice that you won't get a direct flat line. You'll actually get more of a U shape in the bottom. And so what you want to measure from is that bottom. You don't want to measure from the upper side, so you want to measure right in the middle. All right, so I've got that. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into my sweet potato mixture, and that's going to get the wet ingredient for the dry ingredient to go in a minute.
Sounds good. Well, the next thing I need to do, Mr. Greg, is cut the butter into my flour mixture. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It said we needed 6 tablespoons. And if you notice on our stick of butter, it's actually got the tablespoons measured out. So I can use this as a quick measurement. There's actually 8 tablespoons in a stick. So I need to cut off 2 and save those. And then I'll put the other 6 into my mixture. I'm going to use that same butter knife to sort of break it up into chunks to make it easier for me to break up when I go to use my pastry. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm using this wrapper, so I'm going over 2 tablespoons. So I'll make my cut so I know exactly what's going into the dish. And then I'll come in here and I'm going to cut these up into little chunks, and I'll put them into the bowl.
Awesome.
Going nice and easy.
And I see that butter's still very hard, Mr. Jackie. So why would we want the butter? Could I just melt my butter to make it go in easier?
Well, it's going to totally change the texture of the biscuit. When I do this for my regular biscuits, when you got it chunked up like that, as it's baking, it's actually going to melt into the layers and provides a totally different texture. Can you talk about why that happens?
Yeah, so it's really important that you follow the recipe, especially when it pertains to butter, because it's designed scientifically to make sure that you get the right composition and it melts at the right time. So some recipes you might see call for melted butter. Some recipes you might call for, if you're making cookies, a lot of times it'll say room temperature butter. So that would mean you'd have to actually set the butter out and let it sit for a while to bring to that temperature. So the temperatures and all these things play into factors when you're baking. And so this particular recipe and the way that biscuits work, it works best to have a cold butter and to make it into little balls. And you'll see as Mr. Jackie gets to working through this in a minute, you'll see these little balls form, and it's almost like a little mealed kind of product. And so
yeah, when I was in home ec in school, they used to tell me, try to make it look like little bitty peas.
Little bitty peas, yep.
Sometimes you have to come through here and because it's so cold, it's still gelling up, I'm having to knock it out, get it back in there. What I'm going to do is I rotate the bowl, so I hit it from a different angle. It's also nice to have a bowl that's sort of about the same size, just a little bit bigger than your pastry piece if you're doing this. Like I say, you can also use a fork if you didn't have something. And if all else fails, you can just put your fingers in there. Just make sure you wash your hands and everything like we've already talked about.
Exactly. All right, so so as he's getting ready and he's working that in, I'm going to talk a little bit about the next stage of what we're going to be doing and how the next thing is going to flow. And you might have heard our oven's preheated, so we know we're ready to go as soon as we get these finished. All right, so now that we've got our sweet potato mixture ready and we've got our flour mixture ready, so Mr. Jackie's got it perfect, and you'll see they're like little peas is what it looks like in there. And so that's all ready to go. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and combine them and fold them in. And when you see in the recipe it says fold them in, that just means you want to be a little bit more gentle. Because if you're rough and tough with the biscuits, you're going to make rough and tough biscuits, and they're not going to taste very good. All right, so what I'm going to do is there's always a debate. Do you put the wet ingredient to the dry or dry into the wet? Typically, it works a little bit better if you go with the dry into the wet because it makes it a little easier. You can kind of mix a little bit as you go and then add a little bit more. So I'm going to go with that method, but always think about that too when you think about your bowl sizes. So making sure that you have a big enough bowl to fold into. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put in some of my dry. All right, I put about half of it in there, and I'm just going to start the folding process. And when I'm folding, I'm just coming from the bottom, and I'm just working over to the side. And what you'll see is it will start to kind of slowly combine. All right, and what kind of consistency am I looking for here, Jackie?
Well, when you think about a soft Play-Doh, you want it to be where you can work with it because we're going to be actually patting these out into a biscuit and cutting into it. So you're going to sort of want to have like almost a Play-Doh feel to it. It should be light though, so it shouldn't feel heavy when you're doing it. So sort of like a fluffy Play-Doh, if you will.
Awesome. And so you'll see here now that I've got it, it's still, it's got quite a, it's not quite Play-Doh yet. It's a little bit runnier than that. So I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of my flour. Now, once I add this flour in here and I fold it in, what could I do if let's say I didn't, it was really dry at this point? What's something I could do?
Well, we do a recipe called ice cream muffins, and sometimes if it's not the right ratio, we add just a little bit of milk to it if it's dry. And if it's wet, sometimes too, maybe somebody mismeasured on the ice cream, put a little bit too much in there. You could also add a little flour if it's too wet.
Awesome. And so, so adding that little bit of milk and that little bit of extra at the end can help you get the right consistency. And if you'll look in the recipe, it says here, add use that extra amount of whole milk to add in the end. So I'm probably going to need a little bit of milk here potentially, but we'll see.
All right. And you talk about folding in. I mentioned that ice cream muffin recipe. The kids have discovered when they do that, if they fold it too much and work it too much, it makes those muffins really hard. Yep. And so that we don't want to work it too much, and that's why it does say fold and not knead.
Yep. And so if you were mixing something where it's just a general mix or whisk, you might be doing this right here, but you won't see I'll do that. I'm just going to go nice and easy from the bottom and just folding it in just like this. And I'm basically just trying to combine it. And I'm trying to get to the point where I don't see any pockets of the flour anymore. So I want it just to where the flour's combined. And that looks like I'm pretty much almost there. So what do you think about that, Mr. Jackie?
I think that looks perfect. I think the recipe was right on the money.
Yep, so you see it looks almost perfect. And this is a great starting spot for Mr. Jackie to roll out our biscuits.
Get my work surface floured up. So I'm going to use this particular tray. It gives me a plenty surface, and plus it's going to keep me from making a mess on this beautiful tablecloth of ours. So what I'm doing now is I'm using my sifter, and I'm just going to get a nice dusting on the bottom of my tray before I put my biscuits on here to work in. And then, let's see here. That really is a good dough. It's great. Let's try to get all that out there. How many biscuits does this particular recipe make, Mr. Greg?
Well, it will depend on what size cutter that you're using, or what size cookie cutter, or in our case a cup. But for this recipe, if you're using a cutter that's basically making a 2 to 2.5 inch round biscuit, and then about a half an inch to an inch thick, you're going to get roughly around 9 biscuits. So if you have one and you have a much smaller one, you're going to get quite a few more. Or if you have a larger cutter, then you might get some more.
Gotcha.
Or might get less.
I can just tell by feeling this that this is very light. Like I said, we don't have too much flour in there, so I'm going to be extra careful. And what I'm going to do is if you notice, I'm just folding over. I'm not actually kneading. When I was growing up, I was told, you had to knead biscuits, and maybe with the flour, you had to work a little bit more than today's flours. But I've discovered if I want layers in my biscuits, if I do some light folds, and every now and then, I'll take a little bit of my flour, and that sort of helps get a separation. I don't want to put too much in there. And then I just fold it back over on top of itself. That's each time I do this, I've created a layer that's going to be on those biscuits, and it's going to hopefully make them easy to separate. So I think that is pretty good there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push these out.
And if you notice, he's keeping this flour worked in there, and what that's allowing him to do is to actually continue to work it and to continue to work with it. Because if he didn't have that, a lot of the dough would stick to his hands. It would get very sticky. So this allows him to keep working with it and to get it uniform.
I think I got that to about the thickness I want. Some people might have a rolling pin or something like that. You could roll them out. I just prefer the hand method because you don't need an extra tool if you got that. Now, one thing I like to do with my cup is my biscuit cutter. I would normally come in here and I want to get it wet, or not wet, but get a little bit of the flour on there before I start cutting. And that's going to help it not stick. And one of the most important things when you're going in to cut the biscuits, you want to push down all the way to the bottom and give it just a little turn. And then it releases. And so that biscuit's cut. And I want to do the same thing right here. Down and just a little twist. You can see it separate now. I need to go back into my flour one more time here. I'm going to get probably 4 biscuits on this cutting. And then we'll have to redo. So these are probably a little bit bigger than what the recipe called for, but this was the cup size I had to work with.
And you see this cup size is probably more like in diameter, maybe 4 inches, 3.5, something like that. So it's a little bigger than what the recipe called for, but there's nothing wrong with that. It might change your cook time slightly, but it just means you'll get a little bit bigger, a little bit less biscuits overall, which is perfectly fine.
All right, so I'm going to get these first 4 onto there, and then I'll show you how we actually will work these biscuits. The nice thing is the first cutting of your biscuits is going to be your best cutting because we're not using what's called the trash, which I'll talk about a little bit. And so my bottoms will be perfect. If I was going to do these for a cooking competition, these are the ones I want to make sure my judges got, because the bottoms and tops would be as perfect as we could get with the mixture we've got.
And if you saw what Mr. Jackie was putting in, and he was he mashed it and he just give it a slight twist. The reason they did that helps it to separate. But if he was to, a lot of times you see people, they push down and then they twist and twist and twist, and what happens there is all those wonderful layers that he created by folding it just right. If he was to twist, he'd actually close up a lot of those layers, so when he baked the biscuit, it actually wouldn't rise properly and create those layers as good. So that's what a little baker's trick is, to go down in just a slight turn, just enough to make it cut, because you're mainly wanting to cut it. You're not wanting to seal those edges.
I'm going to try to get, I think I may stop here with 5. That's probably enough for today. I would keep working this until we get done, but I want to go ahead and get these into the oven to cook. So there's 5 beautiful biscuits I think we got ready to go into the oven.
Awesome.
You mind putting those in there for us?
All right, and you can see kind of what it looks like here before they go in. And these look perfect, so hopefully we'll get a nice even cook. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put these in the oven. And I've got my ovens preheated. All right, and what's the recipe call for? It calls for, I think, 12 to 14 minutes. But a good rule of thumb is always set your timer a little bit short of that, because you don't know if your oven cooks a little hotter or a little cooler, and so these times could vary, and nothing's worse than overcooking your biscuits and burning them. All right, so we're going to set the timer a little bit earlier just so we make sure we don't burn them.
All right. And since I've been working with raw dough, Greg, what's something I need to do right now?
Yeah, so this is a good time to go back and wash your hands. So anytime we're working with raw dough or raw ingredients before we get ready to transition or move into something else, it's a good time to wash your hands. So I'm going to actually get ready to wash mine up in a minute too. And I'll actually go first just so I can get ready for our second recipe. But this particular one, it didn't have any raw egg in it like it might be if we had some other baked goods. But we did use raw flour, and so raw flour actually can contain different types of pathogens and bacteria too. So it's meant to be cooked, it's not meant to be eaten raw.
That's a good point.
So the next recipe we're going to get ready is to do our blueberry compote, and this is a pretty simple recipe, and something that we only have a couple ingredients to work with here that we have to worry about. But this is where we kind of bring out a lot of those flavors in that biscuit and give it that extra little pop, that extra little flavor. And so, as we talked about before, it's kind of going to make like a jam or jelly, and the amount of time that you let it cook and sit is going to give you the amount of water that's going to cook out of it. It's going to give you a little bit thicker product. So if you want it a little bit runnier, a little bit more soupy, then you would cook it a little less. If you want it more of a thick product, then you would cook it a little bit longer. And then we'll show you, or I'll tell you about a trick that you could use also. All right, so I'm going to get ready to do this. Also, anytime you're working with the stovetop or if you're working with a hot plate, always assume that once you start that this entire surface is hot. So I won't want to touch this if I can help it. All right, and for this recipe, the only things that I'm going to need is I've got my little bit of citrus juice, I've got my blueberries, and then I've got a little bit of sugar that I'm going to throw in there. All right, so first things first, these berries, whether they're from the farm or from the store, wherever you get them, you want to wash these up real quick before you get started. A lot of times these containers actually allow you to wash in the container. So you can wash it in the container and it'll drain properly in the container. So I'm going to use that, make it a little easier on me, and then get ready to measure these out.
If you were using frozen blueberries, would you have to wash those?
It depends. So when you look on the frozen package, make sure it'll say ready to eat product or not. So if it's not a ready to eat product, then that would mean that you wouldn't want to actually eat those raw. Now if you were pulling them out for something like this, you're going to actually cook the bacteria that would be in there off, so you'd be okay. But if you were going to eat them fresh, maybe for a smoothie, and just throw them in there, make sure you're checking to make sure they're ready to eat.
Good point. Always check. That ready to eat is so important.
Yep.
Also, Greg, with making this, we're not adding a bunch of preservatives and things like that, and we're not canning it, and we're not freezing it. So about how long would something like this last in the refrigerator, after we make it?
Yeah, so this follows kind of your basic guidelines for general leftovers. And so that would mean if your refrigerator is holding at about 41 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's what most of them standardly would be set to, you got about a week. So you got about 7 days that you would want to use this up. And this would be something that you would want to store in the refrigerator after finishing.
Yeah, that sort of makes sense. We do an apple butter at the house, and we freeze it, and then we'll pull down a jar, and we'll leave it out for a week just using that same method. So makes sense. All
right, so this recipe calls for 2 cups of blueberries. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of measure these out. I think I'm probably going to use almost all of them. So I think I'll be, if you're pretty close on something like this, it's okay to go over a little bit and go ahead and use all of what you have. And you can also look for, when you look through your blueberries, you might have some stems still on there, so you can pull some of those stems off as you're going through. But I'm gonna get these, and I'm realizing now when I'm pulling through that I've got about 2 cups here. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and use them all. All right, so I'm gonna put them all in here, put them all in my container. And what I've done now is I've got it in here, and now I'm just gonna add a little bit of my my citrus juice, and it calls for 2 teaspoons. And feel free to use a measuring, like a teaspoon if you have one, or this is something that the measurement doesn't quite have to be so perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw a little bit in there, 1, 2 teaspoons, just enough. And as far as when you're measuring and you get used to doing things this way, some of these things you won't have to measure, and you'll be able to figure it out just by eyeballing it. All right, so I've got that. Now, what's the last thing I need, Mr. Jackie?
Let's see. Let me double check that recipe. I think we need some water.
All right, so I'm going to need a little bit of water.
And sugar.
All right, a little bit of water and a little bit of sugar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and measure out my sugar. I've got about 1/4 of a cup of sugar in here. All right. I'm going to get that in there, and then I'm going to get a little bit of my water. And how much water does it call for?
Let's see here. It's 3 tablespoons of water.
All right, so 3 tablespoons of water. So if you'll rinse that out for me and get me a little bit of water in there, I'll measure straight from there.
Now, should this be cold water or hot water, Mr. Greg?
It really doesn't matter. It just needs to be water, because I'm going to heat it up regardless. So
okay.
It'll be fine either way.
That should make it easy for you to
measure
out of.
And I'm going to measure out of here. And if you notice, I didn't take this teaspoon back to the thing and do a tablespoon back and forth because I can create a mess, and you don't want a slippery mess in the kitchen because you could fall and get hurt. All right, so I'm gonna put me 3 in here, and if I needed to add some more later, if it's not getting as much sauce as I would want, I could always add some more later. I'll keep it here just in case. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it up, and this recipe says that I want to cook over medium heat for about 10 minutes. So I'm gonna get it up to medium heat, and then I'm gonna get it cooking. And part of the recipe too will say that you can keep half of the berries out and then put the other half in at the end if you want more thick parts, or you want more of a if you want to actually see the berries in there. But for this one, I want it to be a little bit sauce. It's going to be inside of a biscuit, so I don't necessarily have to have that visual presentation as much. So I just want to go ahead and throw it all in there and cook them all down at the same time, and they'll start to reduce. So I'm going to let it get up to heat, and it'll start to cook down, and we'll see how it kind of changes as we go.
You know, as you're doing this, I was just thinking, when me and Jennifer, we make homemade apple butter, and one of the things we want a really nice creaminess to it, and so we have an emulsion blender, and it's like on a wand, and so we can actually stick it into the pot, and we can actually churn it up and get a beautiful looking spread. So you know, to give you that perfect quality. So if you don't want the bits and you really want to make it look good, you can do that. So if you got something like that and you really want that look,
yep,
you can do it right there in the pot. So it's designed to actually go around in the pot to get that smoothness.
Exactly. So so as I'm cooking this, one thing that a lot of times people might use is they might would use just general jam or jelly that you buy at the store. So you can buy a blueberry jam or jelly, or maybe even you might have a homemade one that you did through home canning yourself. Do you know what the special ingredient that makes it a little bit different than this versus in canning, Mr. Jackie?
If I remember correctly, I think it's pectin. Is that right?
Pectin, yeah. So pectin is an additive that we put in, and it naturally occurs in plants. And what it does is it helps it to thicken into gel, and so that gives you that gelling and that thickening. So for this particular version, because we're making a compote, we don't need to add any of those things. And if we wanted to thicken it up, we could add a thickener, something like a cornstarch or something along those lines. But for this one, we're good to go with what we've got. So I'm just letting it kind of continue to heat up, and it'll as it heats up, if I find a little stem or something in there, I can go ahead and grab those stems out, and we'll just wait and let it continue to reduce while we wait on our biscuits.
You know, a few years back we were doing the Farm to Fork camp, and you taught how to make a blueberry sauce. And so what I'd love for you to talk about right now is, how could somebody take this base recipe that you're doing and turn it into something for another dish?
Yeah, so all sauces kind of have the same basic components, and so you're going to have whatever gives you the flavor from a base standpoint. So for here it's blueberries, and so we actually made a blueberry barbecue sauce. And so what they did is they added in some vinegars, they added in a little bit of tomato and different things and different spices that allowed it to transform into something that was a little more savory. So it's kind of that sweet savory kind of thing. And so for what we're doing here, we can just let the natural sugars and a little bit of added sugar be more of a sweet flavor. But yeah, so if you want to make any sauce, you can try different fruits, you can add different things. But most of your sauces are going to have some form of base, a little bit of liquid, a lot of times some kind of acid, whether it be juice or some kind of citrusy juice, or it would be vinegar. And then you're going to have some herbs and spices that you might add in to really pop those flavors off. All right, so it's looking like we might have our first check on our biscuits.
You want me to check on those for us?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, I'm going to go over here. And one of the things I like to make sure before oven safety, and when I open up the oven, I'm going to step back just a little bit so the steam can come off of there. I can do a quick check and tell that those biscuits are not ready. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more minutes to the timer.
All right, so by adding 2 more minutes, that's going to get us to our base time that they had said. So that means that maybe we're right on track for what we would need to do. And now too, I know you can't see, but what's going on in the pan is we're starting to get some bubbling. We're starting to get some simmer that's going on. And so as this starts to simmer, you're really starting to get the aromas of the blueberries. So you'll start to get those smells coming through, and that lets you know that it's releasing a lot of those juices and things that are on the inside.
Something I can see from here, it's like the skin on the blueberry is actually splitting apart into pan. It's like they're coming undone.
Yep, and so they'll start to come undone, and they'll start to break apart, and slowly it'll just become more of a paste and more of a sauce. But you'll still see some solidity to some of these blueberries. All right, so I'm letting it continue to go. Now, Mr. Jackie, when you said that the biscuits weren't ready, how'd you know they weren't ready?
Well, one, I could tell by the color, even though these are sweet potato biscuits. But by looking at them, they don't have the coloring that I'm looking for. As a biscuit, it starts browning and going through that process. So I could tell they definitely need to go a little bit further.
And what's another way maybe that people can check? So maybe let's see, I've got a little browning going on, but I don't know if it's still doughy in the inside.
Well, when we're doing muffins and things like that, we can check it with a toothpick. So if you submit a toothpick into the center and it comes out dry, then it should be done. Biscuits are one of those things that you can check that way. Hopefully, normally the recipes are close, but I did use a bigger cutter than the recipe called for. So these biscuits may have to go a little bit longer.
Awesome. Yep. And I'll turn this up a little bit here so you can potentially see. And you'll see it's really starting to change what it looks like on the inside. And now I'm really getting a good solid simmer going. And I want to keep this simmer up for a good, 15 to 20 minutes potentially. And to really cook them down and really let them release a lot of those flavors and marinate in there. So it's almost like creating that sauce. But you'll see, all right, so Mr. Jackie's going to go check the biscuits for us again. But what you'll see is going on here is it's still very liquidy. It still has some solid parts and very liquidy. And if I get to the point where I've cooked it maybe 15, 20 minutes and it's still very liquidy and it's not something that I would want to put onto on my biscuits, I can throw in a little bit of cornstarch, and what that'll do is that'll help thicken it up. So the cornstarch acts as a thickening agent, very similar to like the pectin would in the jam or jelly.
Yeah, I still think we're at least 2 more minutes away, so that would put us at the long end of the range. Okay. But the one thing you can't do is unbake a biscuit. So
you can't unbake it. All right. So I know that with making biscuits, I learned from Mr. Jackie how to make biscuits, and the process he talked about with kneading, or the difference in kneading and the difference in folding, and how to be more gentle with this. So I'm curious as to how you think this biscuit's going to turn out different than with the traditional biscuits without the sweet potato.
Well, I tell you, the interesting part about this is the first time I've ever used sweet potato to make a biscuit. Like I said, we've had some requests to do it, so I appreciate you getting this recipe for us to do this with. Especially using homemade, farm sweet potatoes. So actually roasting the potatoes in the microwave, cooking them all the way. So I'm excited about it. A lot of people go to the state fair, and there's a booth there that sells what they call the Yammy Hammy, which is a sweet potato biscuit with country ham and it's very popular. So being able to have something like this will give maybe some people that experience of going to the fair.
Exactly. And is there anything that you traditionally use in your homemade biscuits that we didn't use today?
We got butter. Sometimes I'll use buttermilk. It just depends. Buttermilk will actually give you a lot of different moisture, and it's got a lot of fat in it, if you will, that makes it a better biscuit. So sometimes I'll use that. So I mix it up a little bit between that, but I always use a cross with butter and also shortening, because since I didn't use sweet potatoes in my regular biscuits, that shortening is very important to helping with layers as well in the biscuits. So that's one of the biggest differences between these two.
Yeah, and if you ever see a lot of like high-level fancy pastries, the way they get that really flaky and that really like break apart is a lot of times it'll have some form of shortening in there that gives it those really good layers like Mr. Jack was talking about.
All right, let's see if they're done.
All right, hopefully they are, because I sure am getting hungry.
And we got to share with the staff that's here today.
Got to share with the staff.
Oh, we're very, very close. I'm liking the color I'm starting to see on there, but I do believe we're going to have to go at least 1 to 2 more minutes.
1 to 2 more minutes, and that'll let our blueberry compote cook down even that much more. And typically with this, I'll let it cook to a point that I can actually, once you stop cooking the process and just let it sit, it'll actually start to thicken up a little bit. But you can see it's still got quite a bit of runniness to it, which is perfectly fine, because this won't, like I said, it won't be a complete jam or jelly.
If you're trying to hurry this up a little bit, could we take like the potato masher that we used earlier and actually help by grinding up those berries to try to would that help speed up the process of cooking?
Absolutely, you definitely can do that. And what I'll probably do before we get ready to use this is grab something like the masher on the finished product and mash it up a little bit more, and that will help to bring out a lot of those flavors and give you a little bit thicker consistency, so it'll go a little bit better on our biscuit.
And when you do that, since you're using something hot like that, I guess you have to have some extra care on how you do it. You wouldn't want to be splashing, I don't think, a lot.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not going to be aggressive and roughing it up, and I'll definitely want an opportunity to remove it from my heat to let the pan start the cooling process. Because like we said, anything that's on this area and anything that's around this could and most likely is very hot, and so I'll have to treat it with care, and so I don't want the chance to burn myself or anyone else.
Exactly. Now, is this a compote, since we can refrigerate it up for a few days, would this be something that you can make beforehand and just pull it out and warm it up before you put it onto your biscuits?
Exactly, yeah. So you can make this well in advance, pull it out, and use it throughout that entire week. And this is another one of those things too that maybe you make your biscuits and you forget about your compote. So you can always go and a lot of your local farms and a lot of your local shops will have different jams and jellies that you can buy. So you're welcome to buy those and use those instead.
Well, let me ask you this question, since you talked about other berries. Let's say strawberries are in season, or right now I know blackberries are also in season. So could we just substitute out the fruit and make the same compote with just a different fruit?
Absolutely. I know you talked about the apple jam that you make before as well. Any of these types of fruits will go really well with this. We always like to try to throw in these berries, and cooking the berries allows it to bring out some of that extra sugar and make it a little bit sweeter. Strawberries are another great berry that would go really good with this, and so you should be able to, during these seasons, get the blueberries and blackberries, but also during the early parts of or late spring into early summer, you have those strawberries available in the area, so that helps too. So depending on what time of year it is, might be what kind of berry that you use.
All right, I'm hoping y'all can see, but you can definitely see where the layers are starting to come across there. Which is one of the things I like to see on my biscuits. But you can see that the browning, these are a little bit different because the sweet potato color, it's harder to see some of the browning. But you can definitely see we got some great browning on there. I think they're definitely done.
I think they're done. They look great. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, and my compote is definitely to a point now. You'll see that it's a full sauce. It's not. It's got a little bit of thickness to it, just enough. And I'm not seeing any like white areas, or I'm not seeing any clear areas. It's definitely all together, and it's a very dark, rich, really pretty color. And one reason I like to use blueberry and blackberry with the sweet potato, we eat first with our eyes, and so these colors pop really good off of each other. So it has a really pretty presentation, as you'll see in a minute when we put it all together. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take this off, remove it from the heat. I'm going to grab.
Yeah, I got you a pot holder if you want to use that.
Got a pot holder here?
Yeah, if you want to use that one, go right ahead.
You're one step ahead of me.
Trying to help out.
All right, so I've got
team,
this
right?
set here. Yep, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that potato masher that I have. I think it's actually right over there on your side, Mr. Jackie.
I've already moved it over here.
All right, and so I'm going to bring that in, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly just mash a little bit of these berries up so I can thicken up a little bit and bring out all those good rich flavors. All right.
Now, I don't know if you've already said this or not, but let's say we did want to thicken it up and we didn't have the pectin and things like that. What's something that somebody might have at their house if they wanted to make it a little bit thicker right now at this moment?
Yeah, so I mentioned that you might have cornstarch, and so cornstarch is a great thickener that you could add in. You could add it at this stage, or you could add it in during the cooking process, and it'd be a great way to thicken up.
And so this would be the time that you would add it in?
Exactly, yep.
Okay.
All right, so I think we've got it ready here, and so what we want to do now?
I think we need to get a plate out, so we can plate up front. I mean,
yeah, let's see what we can do, how pretty we can make it.
I'm going to pull. I know we got some beautiful glass plates. Let's see. I think we have one right here.
All right.
All right. I'll let you pull out a biscuit.
All right.
You want to break it by hand, or?
Yeah. So let me see if I've got I've got a little a spoon I hadn't used over here. This will be just good enough to do it. All right, so I'm going to pull this one out because he's already opening up, so he's just ready to be eaten. So, like you can see with Mr. Jackie, the way he folded these, he got great layers in here, and so it almost just falls apart. And I know you can't smell it here, but hopefully you're making them at home and you can smell them. Oh, it's a really rich, wonderful smell. And so I'm just going to open this one up, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and take a little bit of my compote, and it doesn't take a lot here, but I'm just going to take a little bit and just center it right there around the center. And as you can see, those colors just really work really well off each other. So you could serve this open face, or you could go ahead and get it ready to eat and close it back up. All right.
Yeah, see, what I like to do, like, you know, we was talking about the apple butter a while ago. I like to do mine open face, so I can put a little bit on each bite, and it's almost like the pizzas that we make here too, with the
Exactly.
So.
All right. Well, we hope you're enjoying making these recipes at home, and do let us know and share all the pictures and things that you make when you make these at home.
Absolutely, we want to see what you made, and can't wait to have you taste them.
All right. See you next time.
Take care.